This is a great turnout. We know this is a good topic for the community. Amber's going to touch into more detail about the process, but I'm going to talk from my end. Just a quick introduction. We have Kurt Coronado, who's been working with us for the past 6-7 months on this project as a committee. He's been great. He's been accessible. He's done back and forth. It's been a very good relationship with us as a committee. He's answered all of our questions, so we really appreciate that. So thank you, Kurt. Before I hand it over to Amber to kind of do her spiel about the whole committee process, the most important thing to remember here is that this was done with a lot of members of the community. And Dr. Valenti, before we started tonight, suggested that we bring up all the success from our fall season as a high school this year. And we've put all of this up on the table here. And not to lose sight, all of the people that participated, and all of our student athletes, all grew up participating in the rec programs and doing all those things. And so it's all built or based upon starting at the young age and working your way up to high school. And we saw that success this year from a high school standpoint, and it brought the community together. So it's a whole community concept. And Amber will touch on that a little bit more. So I just wanted to kind of get started with that. Again, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Any questions that you want to ask after Kurt's done with his presentation, we have our 2 stands here for people to come up. Don't hesitate. We want to hear feedback from everybody. Okay?
Thank you, Tom. First, I'd like to start off by thanking our committee for all their hard work. This has been an ongoing process for a little over a year now. We started back in December of 2010 with that community forum that we had in the Haldane Music Room. And since then, it's just been an ongoing process where the community has really come together, the different stakeholders have really come together, have all taken an active part in this process. So I would really like to just first start off by acknowledging our committee. From Haldane School, we have Dr. Valenti and Joe Curto. From the village of Cold Spring, we have Bruce Campbell. Formerly from the Haldane School Board, but now on the town board, we have Dave Morandi, John Van Tassel from the town board. Fred Kohut has been representing the Blue Devils Booster Club. Eddie Tock has joined us as a community member. John Champlin has joined us as a community member. From the Village Recreation Commission is Matt Beachek, and from the Recreation Commission, Seth Dinitz, and from Garrison School, Gloria Colucci. So I think that we should really take the opportunity to thank them for all of their hard work. They have given up a lot of time to take part in this process, so thank you guys. I'd also at this time like to thank the people who contributed to the study. Without this, we wouldn't have been able to fund it. So no one group funded this study. It was spread out over the various user groups. So again, thank you to the town of Philipstown, Haldane School, Garrison School, the Booster Club, the Friends of Philipstown Recreation, Philipstown Soccer Club, Philipstown Lacrosse Association, Philipstown Pop Warner, and I'm missing the last one, Philipstown Little League. So again, I'd like to thank all of those organizations for contributing to the study, and it's really demonstrated that this wasn't a one-group process, that it really came from all different angles of the community. So thank you again for all of your help and contributions. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what the process has been since we met in that December meeting, we took all of your comments from the December meeting and we sat down as a committee. We worked through all of our different sites. We worked through the problems, the good, the bad. We worked through what we'd like to see, what we think was feasible, what we wouldn't think was feasible. And then we really decided that in order to really accomplish this, that we needed some outside help. We really needed an independent person to come in and help us form our vision so that it would be a full community effort and it wouldn't be driven by one organization. We went out with some RFPs to various design and consulting organizations, and we were very fortunate to get a response from Ward Associates. And it's been a pleasure to work with Ward Associates through this process. Kurt's first visit up here was back in August, and we took him to all the various sites. He visited the fields. He came back in September and had his initial conversations with the community and listened to all of your initial feedback. And since then, we've been working through all of the information to put together a plan and for Ward to recommend a plan that he really feels will best fit the Philipstown community. I think the key word in all this is recommend. These are all just recommendations. The most important thing to remember from this process is that this Fields Committee does not have the ability to make final decisions. What we have done with the information through this process and what we will continue to do is to bring this back to our respective boards, to present it to them, and to encourage them to move forward. But again, this committee has not made any final decisions. From here, all the respective boards are going to meet with the public on their own. They're going to hold their own public workshops, and they're going to figure out what the best way to move forward with these recommendations are. So again, please don't hesitate to voice your questions, comments, feedback, anything at the end of the meeting after Kurt's done. And again, I'll reiterate the fact that we will ask for you to use the 2 mics so that it can get the presentation is being recorded for the television. And once again, thank you all for coming. It really does show that this is an important issue within Philipstown, and I look forward to seeing this plan come together. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm now going to turn over the microphone to Kurt Coronado from Ward Associates.
Now I don't need to say anything since Amber gave my presentation. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Just the turnout here shows how important the athletic fields and facilities are to the community, and that says a lot just in that. But I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the Athletic Fields Committee and all the user groups for all the input and the help that you gave me during this planning process that we've just been through, and we'll be continuing to go through. I think it's very important to keep in mind that this is a planning process, and this is a plan, and nothing's in concrete. Now, I think some of the things are very obvious, and they'll be pointed out what some of the problems are, but then when it comes to the recommendations and where different facilities should go and things like that, that comes from my experience, 23 years of designing these type of facilities and planning them, and also from what the community needs and what I understand the community needs from the meetings that we've had, the public input, and also all the input from the user groups and the field committee. I've been planning and designing athletic facilities and public parks for 23 years now. It has been, my whole career was with Ward Associates PC. Now I work for BBS Architects and Engineers because Ward Associates, during the process of this plan, became part of BBS Architects and Engineers. So it really doesn't change anything. They do the same type of things we do. They're actually a lot more involved in public school design and things like that. So it gives us an opportunity now to expand into that, and they get to use our knowledge of park and recreation facilities. Basically, we started back in August looking at all the sites, and the first thing I wanted to go over is what's the reason why we needed to do an athletic field study. I believe the reason why is because everybody who uses the fields and everybody who provides the fields became concerned about the fact that the condition and availability of the fields shared by schools and all of the youth sport groups in Philipstown, the condition and the availability was not enough. It wasn't meeting the needs of the community. So the Philipstown Field Committee was formed with representatives of all the user groups and field providers, and determined that a plan should be developed for improvements that best meets the needs of the athletic groups in the most effective way possible for the community. So instead of looking, what each group one at a time needs, the best way to look at it is all of them at once and come up with a plan so everybody's issues can be solved without duplicating services at certain facilities. Who are the stakeholders? First of all, the entire Philipstown community. Everybody who uses the parks and recreation fields in the community is a stakeholder. The athletic field user groups, Haldane and Garrison Athletics and Physical Education Departments, Philipstown Recreation Department, Philipstown Little League Baseball, Philipstown Hawks Pop Warner Football and Cheerleading, the Soccer Club, and Philipstown Lacrosse Association for Youth. The athletic field providers are the Haldane School District, Garrison School District, Town of Philipstown, Village of Cold Spring, North Highlands Fire Department, and the St. Basil's Academy. Total amount of users per season, after we met with all the athletic field user groups and we found out what their, how many people they have in their programs, we came up with a total of 975, almost 1,000 during the spring season use the fields, and about 675 to 700 during the fall season. And they all share 8 facilities that have athletic fields within the town of Philipstown. What issues do the user groups have? Not enough fields for all of the groups and programs competing for their use. Fields overlap each other. Fields are overused and worn down with uneven playing surfaces. The size and condition of the fields and amenities provided are not sufficient for them to run safe, competitive, and effective programs. Many of the fields have drainage problems and the turf is in poor condition. Fields are unplayable for prolonged periods of time after heavy rain events. Lack of bathroom and storage facilities. Limited parking, especially during heavy times of use in the spring and the fall. And the lack of a home game field that they can be proud of when their competitors from other facilities come over and see where they play, and when they go over to other competitors' facilities and play on their fields. Other group-specific issues related to the fields they use, and we'll get into those on a user-by-user basis. Additional considerations that the athletic field committee came up with before the process started were the need for a running track and track and field event areas for the high school team, safe and sufficient spectator seating, concession facilities at key fields, access to water and electric service and utilities, irrigation to improve natural grass fields, and improved access to field and facilities. Transportation of school teams to off-campus sites. They wanted to look at the options and the comparisons of synthetic turf versus natural turf fields, cost, field uses, and maintenance comparisons. The possibility of night lighting to extend field usage. Now, this is a map showing where all the facilities are located in Philipstown. I'm going to start at the top. That one's North Highlands Little League Baseball. The next one down from that is Haldane, the Haldane fields at 9D in the main field, and then the fields at Mayors Park. Then as you head down 9D, you have the St. Basil's Academy, Philipstown Park, Garrison School Fields, and the Community Center. School locations were highlighted on there, which helped us in the process of where to put fields and facilities as we moved along with the study. And we showed where we decided the best locations were for primary game fields in the community. We found that the best location was at Haldane High School, but we should probably also consider having either a secondary field or another location, and those other locations would be Philipstown Park or the Community Center. We developed a athletic fields and facilities matrix to kind of get an idea of what the facilities are and what amenities and support facilities that they have. So the Philipstown Fields Matrix was developed to show the number of fields and the facilities as well as the total for all of Philipstown. We were able to compare that total to the National Recreation and Parks Association. It has guidelines on how many facilities a town the size of Philipstown should have. The matrix also shows the support facilities and amenities. The totals were compared to the Recreation and Parks open space standards. Now, the comparison in the end shows that even when school and private facilities are included, which usually isn't part of the National Recreation and Parks Association guidelines, the community has a shortage of certain facilities and barely meets the minimum standard on others. In recent years, the guidelines have been revised in order to allow municipalities to better determine the amount of facilities they require or level of service they want to provide based on the local needs of the community. This is the actual matrix. Down on the left-hand side, you have the parks, the school facilities, and the private facilities. And then across the top, you have the different types of fields, courts, and other amenities that are at each location. There's a subtotal, or parks total, that's about halfway down the page, and that's what we compared to National Recreation Standards for a population of 10,000. The comparison showed that your short softball fields and tennis courts, you have 2 in the town, there should be 5 for a population the size of Philipstown. And a lot of the other facilities are iffy because, for instance, you do have your 1 baseball field, but that baseball field is also overlapped by other fields, so it can't be used at all times. And we found that the same thing with a lot of the other facilities. After that, after we met with the user groups and Amber and all the providers gave us schedules for how all the fields are used, we were able to put together schedules for the spring season and the fall season during weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays to try to get an idea of where fields were being overutilized and underutilized and get an idea of where some of the problems were coming from. The charts, I think the best thing for the charts in the end will be in the future for them to be used as a tool to schedule the fields, figure out how to rest fields, like come up with a, rest this field every year, and also as a schedule that all the different groups can share to make sure that their different activities aren't conflicting. Okay, you can head to the next one. That's all right. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on these, but I just wanted to show you that we did look at these and we analyzed which fields were being used. This was for fall weekdays. Then fall Saturdays. Basically what you have is each separate field on the left-hand side and the time of the day along the top to show where these fields are being used at the current time. On the right-hand column shows the approximate amount of hours that are available in each one of those weeks for that field. And that can change based on different things going on in the parks. For instance, there may be something going on at Mayor's Park where the fields can't be used. But, I think this can be used as a tool. Then we had spring weekdays and spring Saturdays and Sundays. The general recommendations after, I'm not going to go through all the site analysis of the fields because we did that at our last public meeting, but what I'm going to do here is go through our recommendations overall first and then at each separate complex. With the formation of the committee and the completion of the plan, the field committee has already taken the first major step in improving the townwide athletic field situation. The next step is to begin phased improvements to the existing fields to improve their playability, make them safe and accessible, provide needed support facilities, and bring them into conformance with current standards and regulations. So one thing that we did determine as we looked at all the fields and we looked at the whole system of fields that Philipstown has is there's a perceived notion that there's not enough fields and not enough space. Well, the conclusion that we came to is there is enough facilities, but the way the fields were developed, too small for regulation games or overlapping, creates the perceived problem that there aren't enough facilities. So we think by just improving what you have, expanding fields, doing a little reconfiguring of way things are, and taking advantage of some of the sites that haven't been taken advantage of, like the community center, that you have enough space in your facilities to have the amount of fields and facilities that you need. All of the recommended improvements to fields and facilities should be designed to incorporate and retain the town's unique character and authenticity as recommended in the town's comprehensive plan, while integrating green and sustainable design and construction techniques whenever practicable. Recommended improvements that are necessary at all of the fields include implementation of an annual turf grass maintenance program, provision of water service and irrigation for natural turf areas, and ADA accessibility to fields and facilities. The availability and condition of fields throughout Philipstown will be greatly improved with the addition of competitive fields at the community center site and incorporation of a community game field that can withstand heavy and extended use at Haldane High School or Philipstown Park. When we say a community game field, once again, we're talking about a place that can be used for the main games, have enough spectator seating, have scoreboards, concession facilities, and everything you need to have a real nice home field advantage like a lot of the other communities have. Upon implementation of the improvements recommended in this report, the community will have a sufficient amount of quality competitive fields to meet their current needs. The plan should also be reviewed every 5 years or so and adjusted to meet the changing needs of the community. Now we're going to look at the site specifically, kind of a quick analysis of some of the important issues, and then we'll show you some of the schematic plans that we came up with. Haldane main field at the school, we found it was the best location for a community game field. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is to solve some of the transportation issues with transporting soccer teams to St. Basil's and other locations. The game field would be designed so that it could be used for multi-purpose, football, soccer, and all the lacrosse and what other sports that you play on it. Not baseball, but that would have to stay at Mayor's Park. And also have a track facility around it. Currently, the fields, courts, and facilities are not accessible. There's no irrigation, no running track. The ways to expand and improve the facility are limited by the topo and the steep slopes on the site. And the parking is not sufficient during major events. The multi-purpose field is not wide enough for varsity soccer. The grass is not in the greatest condition. The spectator seating does not meet code. And the storage and concession building is not up to code and also not sufficient. The tennis courts, having 2 does not meet the needs of the program, where actually 3 courts next to each other are needed in order to have a meet. And they also have some pretty major crack issues. When we looked at Haldane, we kind of looked at the whole campus and not just one field at a time. So this is kind of a conceptual plan that shows where all the fields are. It also shows where a spot that we looked for possibly relocating the tennis courts up on the north end there. So what you see here is basically all of the facilities and how they relate to each other and how they need to be tied together. This is our concept for the game field at Haldane. Basically what you would have is a 360-foot by 195-foot field with a non-regulation track around the perimeter of it. We don't know how many lanes yet. That'll probably be a question, but that's going to be all part of the process of designing the facility. One of the major ideas that we had with the grandstand was that it should be on the slope side looking down towards the river, because there's such a great view there, then it should be taken advantage of. So that's why we show the grandstand on that side. We also could possibly use the slope to build that grandstand into the slope and provide accessibility from the school buildings up above. This next slide shows expanding the tennis courts to 3 down below, slightly into the stormwater area. What we would do is change the orientation of the courts to the opposite direction they are now and add a 3rd court. So the tennis team would be able to have their meets with the 3 courts next to each other. So that would be part of that plan. We also looked at areas where crossing should be improved between the 9D fields and the Haldane main field, and also wherever people are crossing a street on campus or Craigside, and connecting all those together with safe pedestrian access and also emergency and maintenance access to the field areas. We also show a storage building. That's okay. This is another plan that we. The other one was more conceptual, but this one's actually drawn to scale and gives you a better idea of the track. One thing I didn't mention, there'd also be a support building for storage on the opposite side from the grandstand, and that would be the location where you'd have your scoreboard. Yeah. This is a SketchUp that we developed from that drawing, showing how the facility could possibly look and giving you a better idea of how it would fit into the site. There would be steps from the 9D area coming up, and also an accessible ramp that would make the field accessible from 9D down below. And also access would be provided from the school above down to the grandstands. Yeah. All right, this is a little sketch that we did to show how we could fit some of the track and field events into the plan. The circles that you see at the top left corner and the bottom right corner would be your pole vault area and your long jump area, which would use the track runway. And down on the tennis courts would be the only location for your high jump area because of the space required and the limitations that we have. So the long jump pit would be on the right-hand end, and we kind of show the length of it and how that could fit in there. And the pole vault would be up in the other corner, and kind of the same thing, using the runway as part of the pole vault area. We came up with some estimates. Keep in mind that these are very preliminary, and we haven't done all the the background during the design phase. These are going to have to be developed. These are very conceptual. But we have a pretty good idea from complexes that we've done around the area. So to do all of what we showed there with a natural grass field is in the 2 million to 2,250,000 range. To do it with a synthetic turf field would be more like 2,600,000 to 2,850,000. And then to add night lighting, you're up in the 3 million range. We looked at several different options for the tennis courts during the study, and there was already an estimate given for repairing the cracks on the surface and doing a resurfacing of the courts. That's a kind of a short-term way of fixing the courts for 3 or 4 years. That would be about $25,000. For a longer-term solution, the pavement should actually be removed and built up from the base again to get rid of the cracks forever. That's closer to $80,000 to $100,000. We looked at the possibility of adding a court at the 9D fields, or two new courts at the 9D fields. And then the expansion that I just showed you on that last plan is in the range of about $200,000. We also looked at the possibility of adding courts at Philipstown Park and at the James Pond area of the school campus. For the 9D lower fields, we found several issues. Once again, not accessible, no irrigation, difficult to get water supply, no restrooms, and the storage buildings are not sufficient. The existing Little League baseball field is not regulation size currently because of the slope in the outfield. The backstop fencing and netting is in poor condition down there. And the safety buffer between the baseline and fencing is not adequate. The natural grass and infield clay is also not in the greatest condition. The softball field above, although that's in much better shape, has the same issue with the safety buffer. You're supposed to have 25 feet between the baselines and the fencing. The infield has poor drainage, and the dugouts and spectator seating areas are not sufficient. So this is a plan. Just part of the planning process was seeing how 2 tennis courts would fit there. I don't think that's going to be where we end up, but I just wanted to show you how we went about the process. This is our plan for 9D. The plan is to convert the lower field into a practice field where the high school could use for practice, and youth teams could also use for practice, even for baseball practice. Take out all the existing fencing that's in there and all the existing buildings, provide access down to that area, and put in a new perimeter fence right at the top of the slope to take advantage of as much space as you can down there. The upper area, softball field, would need to be improved. Basically, the infield, the backstop, and the fencing areas in the infield area, and new dugout areas. Then we show where a multi-purpose court would fit. We also discussed adding a comfort station where the storage facility is now, and improving the storage facilities. This is an example of the type of seating that we could see in the slope there that we've done at other facilities. Sustainable type of pavement that lets the water get into the ground, but also takes advantage of the slope. Instead of having steel bleachers, you kind of sit right on the slope. People can bring their chairs and set up their chairs right on there to watch the game. That's just a view from another angle. And this is the type of dugout shelter that we've installed in other facilities. This is in Scarsdale at their Little League field to protect the players during the game. The cost estimates for Haldane for the upper softball field improvements were in the 100 to 125 range. For the lower practice field, 65 to 75,000. Parking and access improvements, which I think I failed to mention when I was on the plan, was 50 to 60,000. Comfort station would be in the 140 to 160 range. That would be for a prefabricated type of a comfort station, and improved storage, 30 to 40,000. Then we looked at the Garrison field. The drainage system currently has some major problems. We were just out there recently in December, and a good part of the field was underwater. Once again, no accessibility, no irrigation, no restrooms, no storage facilities, very limited on-site parking. And the relationship there with the St. Philip's Church is very important because they allow the users to use their the adjacent facilities at the church, including the parking area. The softball field was recently relocated and improved, but there's no baseline fencing to protect players and spectators beyond the backstop. The multi-purpose field is not regulation size for varsity team use and also overlaps the softball field, limiting both of their uses. So this is the proposed plan for Garrison. I think the priorities there, the priority there right away is to fix that drainage problem before doing anything else. And then improve the access from the school and from St. Philip's parking area down the steps onto the field area, as well as from the parking. Then further down the line, I think the multi-purpose field could be expanded to allow for better use. There seems to be a lot of wasted space around the perimeter. And of course, attaching everything together with a trail system that kind of makes each one of the facilities accessible. Our preliminary cost estimates for the infrastructure there were 100 to 125,000, and the field improvements 130 to 150,000. The St. Basil's Academy. It's the only regulation-sized varsity soccer field in Philipstown, but it's not owned by the school, owned or controlled by the school district or municipality. So once again, the relationship with St. Philip's is very, very important. There's major issues there with vehicular and pedestrian ingress, egress, and circulation, and the parking is non-existent, if not extremely limited. Field and spectator areas are not accessible, no irrigation, no restrooms, no storage, and I mentioned how important the relationship is there with St. Basil's. This is just part of the study where we looked at where a regulation track might fit in town. And the best location for it was here. And when this field was originally designed, it was designed with a track around it. Just wouldn't be logical to put it there unless there was a way to make sure that it could be used or some sort of an agreement with St. Basil's. So I think the priority here at St. Basil's is to improve the access to the field. The field itself is in pretty good shape. I don't think it's a priority besides maybe getting an irrigation system there. But I think the major concern at that facility is getting access into the facility from 9D and possibly having a small area where you could have handicap parking and a drop-off area where we show up on in the left-hand side there. We also looked at North Highlands Fire Department fields. They're not accessible. There's no irrigation. We learned from the Little League people that there's possible rule changes coming where they're going to need to extend their fields to make them 70-foot bases and 220-foot outfields. So this is something that's going to have to be considered since this is the Little League complex that the community has. We found some areas where we could consider providing some netting above the outfield fencing, especially if the outfield fencing is moved out to protect the players and spectators. And there's a desire for a playground so the younger children have something to do while their siblings are playing baseball. And we thought it might be some of the area there could be used with a batting cage for practicing. So this is the conceptual plan that shows the improvements that we discussed. The red line shows where we have a concern with balls, where maybe you could have some extended fencing or netting. We also show an area for our children's playground and also a batting cage and a kind of a loop pathway around the whole park where we would provide access to all the facilities from the parking area. Philipstown Park. This was a secondary location that we thought would be good for a community game field because a lot of the infrastructure is there and we have the space for it there. So we looked at Haldane and Philipstown Parks as possibilities for the game field, or the possibility of having a game field at each of those locations, maybe one not as high priority. This is also a possible location for a regulation running track. We did some overlays. There'd have to be a lot of land clearing in order to fit that. Fields, courts, and facilities are not accessible, no irrigation, currently no restrooms, inadequate storage facilities, not enough parking for multiple events. There's an issue with the fields that they weren't constructed properly with the proper topsoil, pitch, and subgrade. There's poor drainage due to the soil conditions and lack of adequate pitch, and the fields are not regulation size for varsity team use. This slide shows part of the planning process where we overlaid the track, just to give you an idea of what a regulation track would look like there on that backfield. You'd have to do a lot of land clearing for it to fit, but it was kind of part of the process that we went through, looking what would fit where. We want to keep in mind that the town had plans done for these parks. About 5 years ago? About closer to 10 years ago. Master site plans were developed for Philipstown Park. And all of the facilities that are shown in this plan should be considered as improvements are made at this park. This is our conceptual diagram of the proposed improvements. We think the backfield, there's enough area there for a full varsity size field, and to expand what you already have there would not be such a great expense. The front field should be improved. I think the size of them is right, and you could have a lot of the younger youth play on those fields, but they need to be improved for drainage and irrigation and get the turf more even and playable. Some of the other ideas here came right from that other plan, the support building, which would have restrooms, storage, and possibly a concession, a children's playground in the area of the building. Parking, expand the parking improvements out to what was in the original plan, and basically improve the access in and out of the park. So we looked at the cost of some of this, improving the infrastructure, approximately $150,000 to $165,000. The cost for improving the front fields, $225,000 to $250,000. Improving the backfield and expanding it would be $250,000 to $275,000. Support building, $350,000 to $400,000. Playground, $125,000 to $150,000. and parking area expansion and improvements, 50 to 75,000. We also looked at to have a game field similar to what we showed at Haldane before. We would need to add, another $1,250,000 to have a synthetic turf game field out there with press box and bleachers and all the amenities that you'd want with that. The Philipstown Community Center. At this point, it's pretty evident to us that this is the most underutilized location where more athletic fields could be added quickly to the system. It's another alternative location for a community game field, although you'd need a lot more infrastructure there, so it might make it a little more expensive than it would be at Philipstown Park. We also looked at the possibility of a regulation running track here. Once again, no irrigation. There are restrooms at the community center, but not at the field location. No storage facilities, very limited parking at the field areas. And we're considering, when we looked at putting Little League fields here, we considered the rule change and the expansion, so the overlays are the correct size. Once again, just a part of the planning process. We're not recommending 2 overlapping tracks, but we wanted to show the size of them and how they would fit into an area like that. Just like at Philipstown Park, this park has been planned and a site plan was developed. And even though the field layouts might not be exactly what was shown on this plan, all of the other amenities and support facilities should be part of any plan when you're improving the community center site. Our conceptual plan, we did several of them, but the one that we thought was the best layout would be to have a full-size multi-purpose field on the large area near the water tower. That would be 360 by 195 to allow multi-use football, lacrosse, soccer. And then a Little League field complex on the opposite side, which would have one full-size regulation Little League field and one practice T-ball field. Along with that, we thought maybe another batting cage for the Little League players and softball players. The Little League field would also be designed so it could also be used for softball. So it'd be also multi-purpose, not just for Little League. And then you'd need to add a parking area, a support building right in the middle, which was shown on the original plan, would also be good there. And then pathways to connect all the facilities together. The cost estimates for improvements there were, for the infrastructure was 150 to 165. Approximately 360 to 400 to build the Little League complex, 360 to 400 for the multi-purpose field, 350 to 400 for a support building, and 20 to 25 for an additional parking area. Once again, we added it if you wanted to have a community game field at that location, the additional cost to do that. Cold Spring Mayor's Park. Issues, opportunities, and constraints of that site. That's the only regulation baseball field in the town, is at Mayor's Park. There's no access, no irrigation, storage building is inadequate in floods, and the parking is not sufficient, especially during heavy use times. The baseball field has poor drainage, especially in right field. The safety buffer between the baselines, dugouts, and fencing is not sufficient. The field overlaps with the multi-purpose and softball fields, limiting use for all of them. And the infield layout cutouts for bases does not meet high school baseball rules. The multi-purpose field also overlaps baseball and softball, has poor drainage, it's very flat and doesn't have a lot of pitch on it, and it's not regulation size for varsity. This one kind of builds on each click. They all were like this, but I decided it would take too long. The baseball field improvements, we did think about relocating. It's not the proper orientation for a baseball field because the batter is facing southeast, But we did, discuss that with the user groups and found that the sun was not an issue. So we decided that that would be the best place to keep the baseball field, and that the infield should be improved, including the the player dugout areas, to get them out of the field area. Right now they protrude into the field area. And to put in some new fencing around the perimeter of the infield, and also to skin the entire infield so it could be used for baseball, softball, and Little League. So it would be a multi-purpose field that could be used for all of those sports. And having the entire infield skinned solves some maintenance issues and makes that infield a lot easier to maintain. Then we would like to reconfigure the multi-purpose field more parallel with the railroad tracks, and that would limit where it overlaps onto the infield area. In order to do that, the field would have to be expanded a little bit into the passive park area where the picnic area is, probably by about 20 feet or so. That fence would need to be moved over in order to do that. But now you would have a full-size field that could be used for soccer, football, and lacrosse without much overlap onto the infield. Of course, that layout would, you'd need to remove the existing basketball court and the softball diamond that's in that area, which are kind of a hazard where they're located now in the field area. They really shouldn't be located in the outfield. And so it would be better to have that facility outside. I realize we would have to solve some drainage issues where we're showing it on this plan, but that would be the best location for it in the future. We also considered having like a perimeter track on the inside of the fence, which would be like a warning track on the field, but also could be used for the community to walk around or jog around. And we looked at the parking issues and came up with some ideas to bring the parking a little bit further into the site to allow more room for backing out, so you're not backing out into Fair Street. So that would be another phase where the fence would actually be moved in towards the park area to allow more space for the head-in parking. And then we envisioned kind of an entrance area near the infield that would be the area where everybody enters the park and comes in to the use area around the baseball infield. And what we're showing here is basically pedestrian paths to make everything accessible. This is just an AutoCAD drawing we did of the same thing. The cost estimates there would be about $150 to $165 for infrastructure, $650,000 to $700,000 for field improvements, $65,000 to $75,000 for a relocated multi-purpose court, $65,000 to $75,000 for improvements to the parking area, and $50,000 to $60,000 to improve or build a new storage facility. So we came up with priorities, and we came up with these recently, so we're still looking for some feedback from the athletic field committee and user groups on what the priorities should be, but some of them are obvious, I think, in priority one. At all of the fields, implement annual turf grass management plan, top dress fill depressions with sand topsoil mix, even out the playing surface wherever there's holes in the field or uneven playing conditions, and that could be done right away. Locate available water supply and provide water service and irrigation. Consider portable overground reel-type system that can be shared with nearby fields, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we get to that slide. And improve access at parking areas and provide pathways to fields and spectator areas. Garrison School, investigate and repair the drainage problem. Upgrade existing system if necessary, and improve the steps and access from the school and church parking. Haldane School tennis courts, repair the cracks and color coat. Our idea was maybe to do that as a short-term fix until you decide, whether we're going to reconstruct those courts or relocate them somewhere else in the future. Philipstown Park, add a bathroom and storage facility, because it's a very heavily used facility. St. Basil's Academy, work with representatives of the academy to improve access to the field. Philipstown Community Center, improve the fields, add one Little League baseball, softball field, one T-ball practice field, and one regulation-sized soccer multi-purpose field. Why is this priority one? I believe because it's the best opportunity for you to gain fields without taking fields out of play. And it's also going to be, these fields are going to be needed when the other fields are being improved. Priority two, the Haldane Game Field tennis courts. And possibly with that project, including a small bathroom at 9D. Haldane 9D field improvements, infield reconfiguration, backstop, infield fencing, new dugouts with shelters. That would be at the softball field, by the way. Philipstown Park, Phase 1, regrade, expand, and improve large field. Could be a lower profile second game field for the community. Mayor's Park, Phase 1, would be first to improve the baseball infield, fencing, and improve access. The reason for that is because I especially don't like the dugouts in the field areas there, and there's some issues with that I think should be taken care of first. Mayor's Park, this is priority 3, would be to complete the improvements at Mayor's Park. Philipstown, complete the improvements at Philipstown Park, which would be the front fields. And the improvements to the Garrison School fields and the North Highlands fields. Real-type irrigation system. Instead of having a lot of these facilities, there's not a lot of depth to bedrock, and there's not a lot of topsoil. And to put in a typical underground irrigation system is going to cause a lot of problems. So what we've done in some similar communities around here is provided a real-type system, which is an overground kind of a traveling sprinkler, where what you would do at each facility is you'd still need water service and you need a pump. But then you have a couple hydrants at each end of the field, and you could share a few of these water reel type things with, between fields that are close to each other. For instance, Philipstown Park, Garrison School, and the community center could share one. Be a little maintenance to use it, but it'd be a lot less expensive than installing the underground systems, and maybe it can be kind of a temporary measure to use until you can install underground systems where you can. Just a little discussion about a comparison between synthetic turf and natural turf. The longevity, it's a safer alternative. It's been proved that because grass fields get worn down and the synthetic turf doesn't, that it's safer to play on. Playability and traction, flexibility. One of the major things with a synthetic turf field, especially if you had it for your game field, you wouldn't have to rest it. If natural grass field, you have to rest it so it's in good shape for the football game. If you had synthetic turf, you could use it all week long, as much as you wanted to, and it would still be in perfect shape for the football game on Saturday. So I think that's the major consideration with synthetic turf. Of course, up front, it's going to cost maybe $700,000, $750,000 more than to construct a natural turf field, but the use that you're going to get out of it in the future is going to pay for itself. Just some cost comparisons. These are basically given out by the the synthetic turf field manufacturer, so I'm not going to get totally into the details of that. I think what I just told you is the major issue, the cost difference. For instance, if we were going to build the turf field at Haldane, it would probably cost about $400,000 to $500,000. And if we're going to do a synthetic turf field there, it would probably cost about $1 million. But then you're not going to have to do all the maintenance on the grass. You're not going to have your field closed down all the time, and you're going to be able to get a lot more use for the money that you spent. We also provided, as part of the report, an annual turf grass maintenance program. And this should be put into effect at all the fields as soon as possible. Has to do with aerating the fields, fertilizing, how to mow them correctly, and how to take care of the turf, along with having irrigation, just to make them safer and more playable and not have so many drainage issues. And that's pretty much where we're at. I'm sure I left some things out, but I'm sure you'll remind me of that when you get your chance to talk. But I'm really, I think we've come up with a good plan and a good start, and it still needs to be developed as time goes along. And it's kind of a elastic type of thing, that nothing that we said here, besides the obvious things, I think have to happen. But I think it needs the community to back it, and the fields definitely need improvement. When you compare them to what other communities have and what the standards are. I think we've come up with a good plan, and now we'd like to get your input. Thank you very much.
Whoever would like to start off with a question, if you want to step forward, you can raise your hand. We can call you up. So we'd like to start off, as long as we're ready.
Tom, before we get started, I know that we've thrown a lot of information at you in a very, pretty condensed fashion. Just remember that this is just the start of this process. Every board is going to take this information back, and they're going to review it multiple times. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for public workshops on a variety of different levels. So if you're overwhelmed right now, that's okay. Just know that this isn't your one and only opportunity to voice your 2 cents. We are going to be looking for your feedback throughout this whole entire process. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And as soon as we get the report from Kurt, it will be available on the Philipstown Recreation website along with this PowerPoint. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to review it and to really take it all in. So
would you like to come up? Sure.
Brian McElroy, Fair Street. I have my own little user group of 4 children who'll be using these fields. I just wanted to point out again from a year ago that there should be a differentiation between the improvement of existing facilities and missing facilities, such as a track and field. A few different times during that presentation, I saw a track described, and then we kind of glossed over it. It's not even, I think it was 3rd on your priority list. We do not have a track. I mean, that's a major sport. Just about every kid in the school could participate in track. Not every kid is going to play the other sports, but I think it's important that whatever we do with the track, that it's a regulation size. I mean, the idea of a place to walk is kind of lost on me. I don't see what that provides in a scholastic sense. So I want to make sure that voice is heard. Other people, we talk around town. There are a lot of runners in this town, and there's a lot of opportunity for students. I'm an example of a guy that might not have gone to college without a track at my own high school. So that's very important to me, and it's close to my heart. And I don't see a voice for a track on this committee. So.
I think that I will speak for the committee to say it has been an extremely high priority for all of us.
It wasn't on the priority list, except 3rd as a question mark. So.
Well, no, it was on our priority list. If you,
Okay.
I mean, it has been something that we've brought up in every single discussion. At the bare minimum, we hope to get at least a practice track in somewhere. To get a full-size track is a little bit more of a challenge, but it's definitely on the table, and it's definitely something that the committee has discussed, and I know that the various boards has discussed. And I think, if I might just be speaking for the committee, but it has been a fairly high priority of ours from the beginning. So.
Well, it's a feature that we don't have. It's not an improvement.
Yeah. No, and it's not only is it something that we don't have, but it's a safety issue. We want to get the kids off of the street running. I think that it's definitely something that we hope, whether it be a practice track here at Haldane or a regulation size track somewhere else.
I don't know what a practice track is. I mean, you can practice running anywhere, and you can practice walking really anywhere.
The reality of it is we can't fit a regulation size track at Haldane.
Well, we have other. We've just discussed a number of
So
facilities.
the other 2 locations are definitely still on the table. There's other,
But we're talking about, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
we're talking about a 200-foot Little League fence as opposed to a 220-foot fence. I don't know the dimensions of the track that we are or not proposing, but I thought that's an important issue to speak about. So just wanted to save my piece.
I think it is under the priority. It's under priority two because it's part of the Haldane game field concept. Is that non-regulation track? Am I correct, Kurt, on that?
That's non-regulation.
Right.
I think we did spend a lot of time looking where tracks would fit, and we have some of them on the conceptual plans. So I think maybe just adding into the priorities that we should continue to try to find a regulation size track. A location for that should be part of the final plan.
There are not a lot of users to speak of because there's no track to speak of, but I'm sure if there were a track, then the number of people who might run on that track may eclipse all the other sports. I don't know.
Okay.
go ahead in the back. Can you just come up to the mic? Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think one of the things that's obvious for me looking at this, and I have two sons in the high school right now, but probably a kind of diminishing user in terms of my boys who will be leaving, but I'll be a long-time community member. And it feels like a lot of these fields were probably created in a fairly random fashion. As opportunity came up, we developed fields because we needed them. So I guess my simple question is, when we're looking at all these plans, is there a priority in terms of location? For instance, as a community member, even with my boys leaving the school, it feels like the high school surely is a place that would have a great priority for the community, for sports teams, and certainly community members would love things like a track, as you mentioned. But I guess I mostly wonder if there's an idea toward consolidating, so we're really focusing on potential expansion in a couple of locations and really making them top line, as opposed to spreading out our priority with all these various locations, or is that not possible because of size regulations?
I understand your question, and I agree that some of the locations should be developed as we're calling them game fields, but that would be your highest quality field where a lot of your games take place. The other places we're saying they should just be improved to get up to current standards and be accessible and be safe field areas. So we're not saying we should have a stadium, every park should be a stadium. We're saying certain areas should be, take advantage of what's offered there, but make sure all of the facilities are safe and brought up to standards at the same time.
Absolutely, and have we as part of this yet chosen what those priority places would be, or we're still at the early phase of figuring that out?
I think we're still at the early phases, but I think Philipstown Park, the community center, and the Haldane School would be three of the main priorities. And you also have to look at the baseball field at Mayors, since that's the varsity baseball field.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm Mike Armstrong on Morris Avenue. The question I have has to do with the parking on 9D at the ball field. Right now it's extremely hazardous. People are backing out onto 9D, and it's particularly in busy games, and there's a busy period, it's an accident waiting to happen. And I'm wondering what plans you might have for improving that parking and making it safe. In particular, it's missing a sidewalk. There's no way for pedestrians to interact with those cars safely now.
We have looked at making improvements to that parking area and basically adding a sidewalk that would be on the opposite side of the fence there from the parking at the top of the slope. That walkway would also have another one coming off of it that would provide access down to the softball field area. We propose putting wheel stops in there also that will organize the parking spaces better and make people park in front of a wheel stop, sort of like what they have down at Mayors Park. And we also recommended turning them on an angle, so when you come, almost the same way they are at Mayor's Park, so you don't have to back straight out, you back out at an angle, and there's enough space there where you don't need to back out into the street.
Because 9D is quite an active street. I'm wondering if you could orient the cars to actually face 9D and have a simple one-way in and one-way out for that lot. I don't know if you've considered that, but as a way of really going to far ahead in safety for that area, so you're not backing into the roadway at all.
We did consider that, but it wouldn't be possible without actually taking up some of the park area, or some of the field area, which is also very, very limited. So we think using the area that's already there and kind of reconfiguring it a little bit could make the area a lot safer and make the circulation work better. Especially having a sidewalk there where people could walk in front of the cars on the other side of the fence instead of behind them when they're backing out.
Mike Haynes, a couple of kids at Haldane and a coach with the Philipstown Soccer Club. Thank you very much for everything you've done. I've obviously done a lot of work to get us here, and a lot of thinking there. Just a couple of comments. The track, I think it's wrong to call it a track because you can't run round square corners at any decent speed. My son does a 46 300 in 7th grade. He would fall over just doing that. I mean, that's 7th grade. We get to high school, it'd be ridiculous. Pole vault, well, that's a very good idea, but, and don't take these comments wrong, just throwing a few ideas. Pole vault's really a good idea, but we haven't got a high jump yet, and if pole vault's going to cost us $20,000 to put in, I think, estimate. I think that's a sort of thought that's a long way down the road. I think we try and think our priorities right. As a coach at Philipstown Soccer Club, had 5 home games at St Basil's this year. We played there once because of the drainage, and you thought the drainage was good there. We actually had to play at Philipstown Park Ball because it's better drained, so we need to think about what we're doing there as well. So, yep, we couldn't play there. It was just too wet. We just couldn't play there at all. Baseball, having a skinned infield, I think it's going to be pretty dangerous for the kids at the high school level. Also, I've never seen a baseball field without a fence around the outside of it, and so if you've got an extra field there, but there's never going to be a fence in the baseball field. So I think maybe we ought to start thinking out of the box, maybe. Did we actually consider any other locations? I know there's a flat location at the corner of 9 and 301. Flat space is open spaces land. Could we use that? Could we do some other thinking here? Just throwing some ideas out. If we did that, then we could maybe use Mayor's Park for a real track down there and fill that up and have it all flat in the centre there. Just want to know what sort of other thinking we've had for space.
We did do some overlays to see where a baseball field would fit. I believe it would fit at the community center by the water tower area. Maybe we can include some of those overlays in the plan to show where we did look at it. As far as the track being square, that's just a conceptual diagram. It would actually have radiuses, and we show it in the back there on that board and also on a slide. It wouldn't be a regulation track, but it would have radiuses on the corners.
I could jog around there. I couldn't run. And that's at my age. They put high school kids around there. They'll fall over. We'll have people with cut knees and everything. But what I was really referring to with space was what other facilities that aren't facilities today. We've only talked about using the current facilities. What other facilities have we done?
We didn't look. We just looked at the facilities that are used. We did not look at other pieces of property. That wasn't part of the process.
Maybe that's something we ought to try to do. Just to look at.
We did look at Graymore and some of the facilities there, and they have some. They have an old tennis court facility and some large fields that could be a possibility down the road. So
there are also plenty of places around here that are covered in woods that are dead flat. Maybe we can take some of those. $750,000 for a baseball field. I'm sure you could do a lot of work clearing space and everything else. Thank you.
Maybe what we could do is add into the plan a statement about always keeping open to possible land acquisitions for some of these facilities as you go down the road.
Kurt, can you talk about some of your experience recently putting in skinned-in fields? Because I know it's becoming a more and more common practice. So I don't know if you could maybe touch base on that, and then the removable outfield fencing, which we've looked at for all the fields as well. So.
Yeah, just having the complete skinned infield instead of a grass infield for for a little league or baseball just allows you to use that field for more than just one sport. If you have a skinned in field that's laid out for baseball, then you could also use it for softball, little league, and baseball. So when there's not a baseball game going on in that field, you can use it for whoever else needs it. Having the whole area skinned and having the clay put in correctly with drainage underneath it, with a layer of gravel, sand, and then built up and pitched correctly, you won't have the water sitting in the infield. You get it out into a swale in the grass areas where it can get into the ground. I think the biggest consideration is also maintenance. It's much easier to maintain those grass infields where between the grass and the clay areas get very difficult to maintain, and it's got to be rebuilt every few years, which you don't need to do as often with the skinned infield. We have used also used the temporary perimeter fencing before, and depending on what type of system you use, that can work. Whether you get the breakaway, the plastic type. We've even done it with regular chain link fencing for a field in Scarsdale. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but that's the way they wanted to do it. So that's another possibility.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Kane Sites. 4 kids. One's already graduated. Another's going to graduate, I think, before some of this comes online. But I have 2 more, so we're hopeful that that some of this can be implemented in the few upcoming years. I got to express one point of disappointment. I would really hope that you would have had this report available to this community and available online before this meeting. I think it would have been much more productive. And I think at the last meeting, you had said you, in fact, intended to have it available. So I think, again, in the future, it'll help, I think, get more information out earlier if you can get that to the community. But let me just go off of that and be a little more positive. I think a lot of the details you bring, your experience is great here, and some of the rehabilitation of the fields and the reorientation. Again, very good stuff, very important. I think the idea of a non-regulation track, in my opinion, I got to agree with Brian. I mean, we have one of those now. We don't really have anything. So I think if we're going to spend the money on a track, we should, in fact, have a track that is regulation that the kids can be proud of when they run on. Possibility if you can have a home meet here. Again, goes back to the community spirit and school spirit. I think it's very important that be part of the plan. Whether it can be at the central fields here or has to be off-site. Again, not as convenient, but something I think really should work towards. And I think the one piece missing in your budgetary, at least as far as I view it, there really are several different institutions which are going to fund parts of this program. The school district's going to fund some part of it. Potentially the town funds some part of it. Garrison School funds some part of it. So really, when you're breaking these priorities, it's is it a way to carve out when you do this really institution by institution, so they can then figure out their own funding process and how to really move forward on the area that they control. Yeah, thanks.
Stephanie Hawkins, Cold Spring. I'm interested to know what the lifespan of synthetic turf is. I saw a 10-year reference up there about maintenance, and I'm interested to know that, and also whether there are recommendations for standards of use and field rotation for natural turfs to help us better understand, well, geez, how many times should we let it lie by itself, quietly recovering, in order to sort of have comparable use and access over a period of time, like how the same lifespan of synthetic turf, so we can kind of get a handle on that. I think it's twice as much to install, and it sounds like the overground, or I forget the name, forgive me, the irrigation system that isn't submerged sounds like a reasonable alternative for certain situations we have here. So if you could comment on this.
The synthetic turf question, usually they're lasting about 8 years to 10 years, depending on how heavily used they are. So a field that's lighted and is used, during the day and the night is not going to last as long as one that doesn't have lights. Most of them come with 8-year warranties, and they're finding that they run out right around that warranty time, just before it or just after it. And I think some of the companies are planning on extending those warranties to 10 years now. But generally, you're looking at about a 10-year period for the field. You won't need as much maintenance for a synthetic turf field, but they tell you that you don't need any maintenance. You do need to maintain them. You need to brush them almost like a tennis court. There's rubber infill in there that needs to be kind of spread around to make sure it's even. The overland irrigation system does work good for the turf fields. That's going to cause a little more maintenance than an underground irrigation system, though, because you're going to need somebody to move that equipment around, pick it up when it gets to the end of the field, and move it back to the beginning or bring it to another complex.
What are the recommended standards for rotating a natural?
I find that most communities, they never find time to rest them at all. So I don't know if there's a standard, but I would say like every couple years you should redo a field, which would basically be kind of breaking up the topsoil, resodding it or reseeding it and starting again, because they're going to wear down, and after a certain point they're just going to be so compacted that no matter what you do, even if you're rested, it's not going to help. So the idea would be to use a field for 2 or 3 years, and then have enough fields so you could take that out of service for a year and let it, redo that field and get it back into the rotation the next year.
Do you think that the annual cost for tending to a natural turf field is $50,000 a year for 10 years? I mean, does it cost that much? Because that's just the equivalent.
For 10 years? Probably more expensive than that, I would think. What did you say, $50,000?
Well, I'm comparing it to the turf, the synthetic turf. The cost of the installation is $500,000.
Yeah.
And, amortized over 10 years, really $50,000 a year. But really, does it cost $50,000 to maintain?
I think you have to consider that, and you also have to consider now how much more use you can get out of the field. You can use it all the time. You don't have to rest it, especially if it's like the high school's main field, where a lot of high schools, if they have a natural turf field, nobody can use that field the entire week except the football team, so it's in shape on Saturday. Now, if you have a synthetic turf field there, now you can use it around the clock every day. Phys ed can use it, soccer can use it, lacrosse can use it, and then football can have it in perfect shape on Saturday. So I think you have to consider both of them at the same time, the maintenance costs and the usage that you're going to get out of the field.
Yeah, that's why I asked you about the rotation, the field rotation. Thank you.
You want to answer that? Go to the mic.
Come on, you know better.
It's not a full $500,000 replacement every 10 years. You don't have to do all the subgrade work again. You don't have to put, all the infrastructure back in place. You're just replacing the carpet, which is more along the lines of $200,000, I believe, right? So that's really what you're budgeting over the 10-year period. You're not budgeting $500,000. You're only budgeting $200,000.
Well, you're budgeting, okay, so 10 years turns out.
Right. So it's instead of $50,000 a year, it's $20,000 a year.
It'll be $20,000 a year.
Correct.
The next 10 years, right?
Yes. Instead of $50,000. I just wanted to clarify that.
Hi, Scott Higbee from Garrison. I've got 4 kids that'll be coming up through the system. And first of all, I just have to say thank you to those who are taking the initiative. I think this is really great. And it's about time that we see something like this. I think when we look at other communities around, we are way behind others in terms of something that our kids have to be proud of. And I'm glad to see this, and hopefully we can get some momentum behind the initiative. I will also say, I think to that point, with a synthetic turf field, you can use it rain or shine. And when we think about last year in particular, I mean, the PE classes all day, soccer, lacrosse, football, there were weeks that field was not used, and that will be avoided. And so, and I think you try to evaluate grass versus synthetic turf, it's night and day in terms of the usage. And when you dollar cost average that over the lifespan of the field, it really is significant. I also want to ask, really, I think this is fantastic. What are the next steps? I mean, here's the plan. How do we actually get to implementation, to phasing it in? Because if we ask for, there are a lot of cooks in here and everybody has their own ideas, but how do we get to phase B to phase C until we can actually start to get some of these things done?
I think the next steps, and I know that the school already has their next steps in place. They have their next school board meeting is going to focus pretty heavily on this topic. The next steps for the town is we're going to start scheduling some workshops. So the real next step is for the individual boards now to take this plan and to figure out where they're going to go and how they're going to fund it and where their priorities are based on the recommendations from the field committee. So I'd say in the next couple of weeks to months, you'll start seeing some public workshops on the individual levels where we'll get a little bit more in depth to the exact costs. Where can we cut? Where do we need to add? Where's our priorities? And then we'll go from there. I don't know, Dr. Valenti, do you want to touch kind of on what the school has planned in the next couple of weeks?
The Board of Education has scheduled a special meeting February 15th. At 6 p.m., we'll be talking about teacher evaluation. I think we're going to reserve about an hour for that. At 7 p.m., the board will discuss in public session and look for public input the fields issue. So we have a plan to really assimilate the information we're receiving right now and then to develop a plan of how we move forward. So if you're interested in that, come to the February 15th meeting. We haven't decided location. I'm going to guess it'll probably be in the music room.
And I know that we'll be scheduling something on the town level as well.
Great. And one more question while I'm up here. I think it's great to evaluate other areas to the soccer coach who asked the question, but when we look at minimizing costs, I think utilizing we can run up a bill that's astronomical if we're looking at all the different locations. I think realistically with whatever budgets and funding alternatives we come up with, I want to get something done, as well as many in here that I've talked to individually. If we utilize the existing fields and don't have to worry about land acquisition and permitting and all the other stuff, this is something that we can actually see some actionable initiatives put into place rather than the theoretical, which could take years to happen, and all of our kids are going to be gone by then. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
I think it's also important to remember that the field committee will continue to meet on a fairly regular basis as well, so that we're kind of a touchback point and that we can make sure that we're all still on the same page, because ultimately we want to move forward as a community, as this being a community effort, and we'll kind of keep each other motivated, but most importantly so that we're not overextending the taxpayers and the different groups. And so we really are going to do this the smartest way we possibly can. So
I think I just add that I think that's why we look at the community center site as such a priority, because it's already been planned as an athletic fields, and it's the land, you have the land, and if you just improve the fields that are out there already, you can add more fields right away to what the town has. That can start taking the pressure off the other fields and allow you to redo those fields and still have fields to play on while you're doing that.
To make one comment. I know we've heard from a couple people tonight about the track. I would really like to hear more from the track community. But please understand that when we talk about this practice track, we're not simply talking about the track program. We have a physical education program in our school. And I know one of our phys ed teachers are going to speak about that. That gives us somewhat of a location for that. We also have community members who like to walk, and that is part of our motivation. We think we are in a village, there is a center. So that's not to minimize the need for a track. We believe we have a track. This isn't the answer for the track. But from our physical education aspect, from a community walking area, we see some value. But we would like to hear more about that, and really sense the community sentiment about that. So I don't think you should leave thinking that we think this is the future of our track program. It's absolutely not. And I see one of my phys ed teachers nodding to me. So I know he wants to speak. Tony Caldiero, a physical education teacher.
Thanks, Dr. Valenti. My name is Tony Caldiero, and I've been teaching phys ed here at Haldane since 1999. This is Joe Vergadamo. He's a high school phys ed teacher. I teach primarily middle school age and some of the upper elementary school kids that we have here. Eddie Crow is in the audience. He teaches some middle school phys ed and some high school. And Tim Donahue not here. He's home with his children tonight. He's our primary elementary school phys ed teacher. And I guess one of the things that I really would like to emphasize is the safety of what we provide our kids the opportunity to play on. How important it is that we have safe fields where chronic injuries don't happen and the kids have the opportunity to not just enjoy their athletic opportunities here within Philipstown, but just in every day in the phys ed department. We take an extreme amount of pride in the opportunities that we offer our kids, K through 12 here at Haldane, and physical education, and I think the kids will tell you we're always trying to push the envelope to create new programs and new curriculum for our students to really get a tremendous experience K through 12. And there's a lot of times where we can't offer what we want to do with our kids because of the fields. The fields, the primary age elementary school children rarely go outside to use the field just because we feel like it's not a safe situation for them. We discussed a lot about putting a bathroom down there. I can't fathom taking my second graders down for a phys ed class and then, excuse me, Coach C, I have to go to the bathroom, and I'm by myself, and now I got to send them up the hill through the parking lot into the building where they might not even be able to get into the building because it's locked and it should be. So that's such an issue. One of the other things is I have the opportunity, I work for Amber during the summer. I've done a lot of programs in the Park and Rec department. I've coached a lot of different things here, and I have a wide range of vested interests. I think we all do here, and everyone has to understand that it's so important to have this community-based conversation and thought process to discuss how we can improve the facilities that we have. I'm all for having a full track. I do an extensive track and field program in the 6th grade with our kids. We do jogging is in our curriculum. We do a lot of fitness activities where if we had some kind of working track, it would just open up the opportunities to do more things. Coach D and I are becoming avid runners. The kids see us running around town all the time, and they want to get involved, and they want to have more opportunities to run. So I think if we had some kind of situation where a working track was made available here, that would offer so many more things to our kids, but also to you as residents within the community. I live in Wappinger Falls, a couple miles from Spackenkill High School. That track, there's people on that track 24/7. It's unbelievable, the usage and the importance of it. And again, I just want to emphasize, from our perspective, it really becomes safety, and it becomes what can we implement with our kids in phys ed. And just to take the moment, I've been here a long time. I mean, I taught this guy here. I know how prideful our student athletes are here at Haldane. And it is incredibly frustrating to have visiting teams come to our facilities and almost look down on the student athlete because our facilities are subpar. And I know how prideful our kids are. They really do bleed blue and white. I know I do. We all do here. And it's just the impact that could have on creating another tradition here to have fields that our kids and our residents can take a lot of pride in is just priceless. And I think that would be a tremendous tradition to see happen here at Haldane. Thank you.
I'd like to touch upon a few topics that Mr. Caldiero talked about. Joe Vergidamo, high school phys ed teacher, coach, and alumni. First off, safety. We have multiple classes where 3 of us are teaching at the same time. We can't go outside all at once right now. Most of the time, in the fall and spring, we have a pond in the middle of the field. And if we do go out, we have to cone it off and make sure it's safe. And most of the time, it's not. We start class 7:30 in the morning. We can't go out usually till 12 o'clock. Field's not ready in the morning. It's dewy, it's wet. And again, if it rains Monday, it may maybe still be sitting there Friday. And selfishly, we don't want to go down there and ruin the field for a Saturday home game. So we can't go out at all. And it affects the students. Student engagement is down. Why? Well, we're in half a gym. Half the kids are sitting out, and it's less time. If we have a synthetic turf field, we could all be out there at the same time, and now they're participating for 37 minutes as opposed to 18 minutes. So it affects the student body, K to 12, and a synthetic turf field would obviously be the way to go. Also, with a track I run myself, we would like to see a full regulation track. We all want it. However, if it's 3 or 4 lanes, we'll take it. Coach C's out there with the middle school playing ultimate frisbee. If I'm doing a fitness testing unit, I could have my class running around a track as opposed to, again, marking cones off and worrying about somebody extending into an end zone and knocking, a high school kid running over a middle school student or vice versa, or maybe a second grader out there when Coach D's out there with us. And I don't remember the last day the 3 of us have been down there because in the fall, we all know it. And we're always talking about it, and we all want to see it. And for all the fields, I'd like to see whatever fields could get upgraded because every team would benefit from it. And the turf field alone, every team would, whether it's an indoor field or outdoor field. If it's a springtime, the volleyball team could be down there running around the non-regulation track as opposed to running around the streets or in the hallway. And I'm sure all of you care, you're here, and you've seen it all. The hallways are packed working out because every student is engaged in at least one sport, almost. And we need the track for non-seasonal sports as well, and every team will benefit from it, including Pop Warner, Little League, lacrosse, club lacrosse, and et cetera. So we'd like to just extend that out because the 3 of us have coached multiple sports here. So thanks for your time, and we just want to share that with you.
Mike Armstrong again. One of the options that you showed was a 40-place parking area that you had optionally could become tennis courts. What are the arguments for what creates the need for the 40-space parking area? That is, what would be the value of that versus the tennis courts? It would presumably be a good place for tennis courts, but you were thinking of putting parking in there. What are the arguments for both, I guess?
I think it was part of the planning process when we were talking about possibly relocating the courts. And if we did relocate the courts, what would become of where the courts were before? So we said, well, we can improve the parking situation. And that was something that was discussed for a little while, but we decided that probably wouldn't be the right way to go. We also discussed making the tennis courts multi-purpose courts so they could be used for, besides just tennis, maybe for volleyball and basketball also. And we think all of the if there are new courts built in the community, they should all be approached that way for multi-purpose.
Did you analyze the parking requirements for the area during a game, for example, a home game or something? Or did you analyze the parking requirements that would trigger a perceived need for those spaces? Or is it just a general feeling of need for parking?
We didn't analyze it above just hearing, from people who were there when there's football games going on that traffic and parking down there is a pretty serious issue. We didn't do a traffic analysis or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Eddie Barry from Philipstown Little League. Kurt, based on your experience, how have other towns paid for what we're proposing? Some big numbers up there, and I'll put on record, if I win Powerball, it's paid for. But as a combination of, you got it. Is it a combination of donations, municipal bonds, or how have other towns paid for it? And, Amber's going to lay out the timeline eventually and tell us, when the boards are going to take a look at their numbers and dates and whatnot. But based on your experience,
the town that I live in, Huntington on Long Island, pays for their park improvements through a bond, which was basically to acquire property and also to improve parks. We did a study similar to this in the town of Mamaroneck, the village of Mamaroneck and the village of Larchmont, and the school districts in that area. And they raised private donations. They raised about $2 million. and that was added to what the school district was already putting into the project. So basically, the school district was going to improve the field, minimal improvement, new natural turf field, and this Fields for Kids is the name of the outfit. They basically had a website, and they got donations, and they ended up raising enough money to get a full track and a synthetic turf field and lights.
And the last thing I want to say is there were a lot of thank yous going on here, but I want to point out that I want to give a big thank you to Amber for really putting this all together. Amber, thank you.
This has been a 100% committee effort. I do not deserve any type of special credit. I mean, Tom, my co-chair, without him, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So please, 100% committee effort. But thank you. Yeah.
Tom Virginamo, teacher and coach, also alumni. I guess I have a few questions. One, was James Pond ever looked at for a baseball field at all, or is there not enough dimensions up there?
No, we didn't, but just knowing how expensive it would be to build tennis courts there because of all the earth moving, I can't imagine that, it'd probably be cost prohibitive.
Exactly.
There is a flatter area up the hill further where we were looking for possibly relocating the tennis courts, but you're getting pretty far away, and it would be a lot of earth moving to build a baseball field there.
Exactly. Second question, down at Mayor's Park, I'm all in favor for whatever we can do. As far as skinned infield, I play a lot. Dutchess County, Putnam County, I travel all summer long, East Coast, Long Island a lot. And I know of one skinned infield, it's Stitzel in Poughkeepsie. And I know the coach very well. And it just gets hard. Winter gets hard unless you're constantly rotating that soil. It's tough for the athletes. So now at Mayor's Park, also the basketball court, we don't have a regulation-sized basketball court in this town. And I see, last weekend I was home at my parents' house. I see guys come home from college playing down there. I see students, fifth graders playing down there. I see second graders playing down there. And without a full-size regulation basketball court in this town, they play at the churchyard and at the school. But it's tough. So is that going to be regulation size or?
It was designed to be high school regulation size.
It is, okay.
Yeah, so that'd be 84 feet long by 50 feet wide with a buffer around the perimeter.
Yeah. Last thing was the mound. It's tough. I don't know if you're talking men's softball or women's softball, either or, but it's tough for someone to pitch and then run up the mound for that my guys are throwing off of. That's kind of a safety issue. I don't know if you have any rationale or how you're going to build the mounds for that. But I know, were we looking at women's or were we looking at men's?
We're looking to make the field multi-purpose so everybody can use it. But we have done portable pitching mounds in the past where you can, for baseball games, you can put a mound out there and then take it off the field, so you can use it for other things. And the fact that field is in a park that's used for a lot of other events seems to be another reason why that type of infield would work well there.
Excellent. And lastly, the track. Bruce, I think I talked to you a couple years about it. I think down there, I could be wrong, but there might be enough space for the regulation-sized track. Is that correct? Or
we did the overlay of the regulation-sized track there, and you'd need a little bit of a bridge or a dock to get it out over the water. It doesn't fit.
It doesn't work?
No.
All right. Thanks a lot for everything. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just want to make a couple comments on some of the driving forces being on the committee. Probably about 9 years ago, I think Joe Curto and I started the Buildings Committee, or were working on the Buildings Committee for Haldane. And so the person interested in thinking outside the box about the tracks, I think we looked outside every box there was. A regulation track is huge, and we did the overlays with the architectural firm we had on here. We did everything from Marathon Battery to every piece of land that we thought we might be able to acquire. I mean, obviously it's going to be cost prohibitive, and we're not going to be able to buy any more land. We have the land, so what we're trying to do is get a smaller track and something that we can work on. And if it doesn't, you know, if we can't have regulation meets here, that's one thing. I think that we need something here, and so people can practice on and go to other neighborhoods. So we really have put a lot of effort in the committee over the last 10 years of trying to find a place to put a regulation track, and it's a large space needed, and there just really wasn't anything. I think we're going to run into problems down at the town parks because of maybe some restrictions on the land use that we have with the people that had given it to us, and also with how much you know, trees and land would have to be, you know, cleared for that. So we really did. I want to let you know that we have given a lot of thought into that. I think another thing I'd just like to mention that wasn't mentioned is one of the driving forces is transportation for Haldane. Transportation is a huge issue. Every place we have to go to, you know, to practice or whatever, that costs us money. It costs the taxpayers money. We have to have buses. We have to schedule people to drive back and forth every time we go anywhere. And obviously, we're doing that right now, going to St. Basil's or everywhere we have to go. So, you know, it's another consideration we've taken in that's really going to be a driving force on this is how to keep people on this campus and you know, save the taxpayers money in the long run on that. So, thank you.
How you doing? PJ Keating. I teach here at Haldane. I'm also the winter track coach. I've been coaching track for 11 years and involved for a long time. I'm not going to talk about the track, I promise. I just wanted to point out that, you know, I've been coaching for a long time and involved for a long time. One of the things that I do think we do need here are some field event facilities at the very least. You know, kids come, they think track is nothing but running, and they don't realize there's jumping involved, there's throwing involved. You know, I used to look up at the old boards that used to be down there. There's obviously some tradition here with track and field. So I do think it is important to get something, at least as far as jumping pits going. And the one thing I didn't notice that I was curious about is whether or not there was any place that we could think about putting some throwing circles in. Shot put, discus, something along those lines, maybe across 9D. You know, it's a place where Tony could start in the middle school, at least working with kids, and they'll realize that, you know, it's more than just going out in the roads and running what they see all the time. So I was just curious whether or not throwing events were anywhere you looked.
We did discuss possibly locating those down in 9D, and we could show how they could fit in there, I think, maybe on the final plans.
Anybody see on my hand? We have anybody else who'd like to add any questions, comments? Come on up.
Linda Hoffman, have 2 sons at Haldane. And I think one thing that concerns me as a parent is the physical education class. We've talked a lot about the fields in relation to the athletic teams, which are also very important to my kids and a lot of the kids in this town. But when you talk about physical education, you got to get them in kindergarten. You got to get the kids out there. Some kids don't have access. Some kids have parents who don't have interest in physical education, and it gives them an outlet that they can go to school and get outside and get in the fresh air. So when you talk about the usage, I think we didn't really include the physical education usage. So when you're looking at the turf fields, I think that has to be a big part of it. My kids went to Garrison first. They were outside a lot. I have boys. They need to be outside a lot. So I think somehow you have to really rope that into usage, because it's not just the sport teams. It's the physical education class that kids might not get otherwise. That's it.
Hi, John.
So first of all, I just wanted to say I'm not disappointed with the turnout this time, so that's good. That's good. Thanks for coming, everybody. Couple things. I know you all saw the numbers up there, and your eyes probably went, whoa, look at that number. That's a really big number. All right. I don't want people to go home being scared of that number. This is obviously just preliminary budgets. Okay, those numbers are going to change. Obviously, as a couple people mentioned, and when Eddie wins Powerball, it doesn't matter, but we're going to do all we can to make this as bearable for the taxpayers as possible. Okay, we're not looking to screw the people over in town. Okay, we all know that nobody has a big pot of gold that we can just pay for this with. But on the other hand, I also think that, you know, we do have a lot of substandard fields here. And they need to be improved. We can keep passing the buck generation to generation. It's been done for 40 years. Because I know when I got here and I went out for kindergarten recess, the fields look just like they look now. That was, a good 35 years ago. So don't be scared of those numbers. If you do have a big checkbook and want to write it, Philipstown, Friends of Philipstown Rec is willing to accept donations. Okay, but I think this is something that we really need to keep the momentum going and work together and try and drive this to a conclusion. Otherwise, we've been talking about this for, Bruce had mentioned, when did you start this? 50 years ago? 10 before me. So I appreciate everybody coming, but we really need to keep it going. Okay, let's not go home and forget about this. Let's not go home and say, oh, that'll never happen. Let's actually try and get it done this time.
I appreciate that you want to help the taxpayer, as I'm a taxpayer. So I would like to make sure that we really put an effort toward doing what Mamaroneck did, which was a nonprofit organization that they started, and they raised a ton of money and they built many fields down there. And I think that we should really look into that here. We've paid for a big new school, and, it's nice to have all these things. I'd like a skating rink in there as well, to be honest, but, I'd really like to say that we took the effort not to just say that the taxpayer was going to be addressed and then hand us a bill, but to actually say we found other way to raise money. And to do that and offset some of these numbers, large or small numbers, $25,000 to redo a tennis court, large or small, we should look for another way.
Well, we do have a nonprofit currently set up it's called Friends of Philipstown Rec, but really ultimately it is set up for all of fields and sports in Philipstown. So,
so when you put together the budget and you put together the numbers and you tell us what it cost us, then you should have that all labeled out, that you do have something and how you're raising money and everything.
Yep, and we encourage anyone who wants to become involved in that process to please let me know, because it's a big process. So we encourage as many people who possibly want to get involved. And anyone who has fundraising ideas, we'll be more than happy to help you facilitate those ideas. It cannot be left to the current people who are in the committee. We need as many people in the community who want to help out as we possibly can. So, yeah.
This is obviously long-term and huge scope. But on a smaller scale and more immediate, like some of the phase one seem like filling holes and things like that. Are there things that, as a community, it sounds maybe silly, but with the right materials that we could all kind of get together, for the spring, for baseball, things like, it's good that we're having meetings and everything, but we have things coming up and we're going to need the fields more immediately. So are there things that would be manageable by a good cooperative effort?
Yes, as long as they were overseen by...
Right.
Yes.
I mean, obviously none of
and we've heard that
stuff,
question before. Can we do some of these improvements?
We did it at the Tots Park. It's very small scale compared to this.
My biggest concern with that is that it's done right. And that,
right.
that there's somebody who overseeing things like that to make sure that it gets done right. Because sometimes you can cause more problems than you can fix.
For sure. But there's a lot of people in town
that's a lot of communities have done it. A lot of communities have gotten a lot of things accomplished that way without going out to bid with a project and having a contractor come in. Maybe have a community fields day every year where everybody goes out and fixes up the field before the season.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to add comments, questions? Again, I would like to thank Kurt for taking the time, for presenting. It was a good study, very good questions tonight. I as well am happy, I'm sure Amber is as well, with the turnout for tonight's meeting. Again, this process is going forward. As Dr. Valenti said, we have a meeting on February 15th. If you need to contact Amber or I, you can locate us on our websites. As soon as we get the final plan, everything will be posted. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact us. Okay? Thank you and have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.